What's up, you metal mongoloids? Today we are doing another album ranking. That was certainly a different intro for this video, but anyway, today we are ranking the one, the only Amon Amarth discography. All 12 of their albums in their catalogue, ranked from my personal least favourite to my personal favourite. Amon Amarth, much like every other band that I've ranked in this series so far, is one of my favourite bands of all time. Why else would I be dedicating an entire video talking about them? It's heavy, Viking, blistering death metal, and it's fucking gorgeous. They're heavy yet also melodic. It's a great band, it really is. Enough said, we're ranking their albums today, starting with, at the number 12 spot, my least favourite is unfortunately Once Sent from the Golden Ball. When you're a band creating music, what you kind of want is for your worst work to be your first work. Because generally speaking, you always kind of want to progress with time and do better than your previous work. So by default, your first outing, this band's first album, does kind of need to be their worst work for them to show growth and improvement with their sound over time. So what are the main reasons why this ranked last for me? Well, the production on this album I feel holds it back a tiny bit. Now, I'm obviously a lover of the more raw, rudimentary sounding production that you get on some of these death metal albums. But this album I feel like needed a bit more polish on the tone. This album isn't without its positives. There are a lot of songs on here that I do go back to and listen to. Ride for Vengeance is a song that is really fast and chuggy. Dragon's Flight Across the Waves is a really, really catchy tune as well. Without Fear is really heavy, and its transition from that song to Victorious March is masterful. Abandoned has a bouncy chorus, and the title track caps off the album perfectly in my opinion. I think my main takeaway for this one is this album had a ton of really great ideas, but it was the execution that kind of let it down a tiny bit in some areas. Still a great album. I still really enjoyed this listen. But yeah, moving on to number 11 on the list, we have The Avenger. Now, leading on from my previous point of a band's worst work should be their first work, we continue that pattern with their second outing being their second weakest, kind of. That's not to say this album's bad though, quite the opposite. Bleed for Ancient Gods is a really epic, explosive intro. Last with Pagan Blood has a really cool, catchy groove and rhythm in there. They tried to do a bit of experimentation, which is why the title track is a bit longer, I feel. God, His Son and Holy Whore is a song that really captures the heavy, blistering death metal that I look for in Amon Amarth, and that's why that song is probably my favourite on the album. Metal Wrath is also an earworm, I won't lie. Legend of a Banished Man has a really cool stomping rhythm, but I feel like they could have done better for the closing track in my opinion. But I do have to quickly shout out the bonus track Thor Arise. I think that song should have been on the full-length album rather than just on B-sides, because that one slaps. But yeah, at number 11 we have The Avenger. Now moving on to number 10, which is Fate of Norns. Not Fate of Horns, Fate of Norns. This one is a fan favourite, so I feel like I'll get a bit of hate for this one. That's not to say it isn't good. I like most of these albums, but I think the main reason why this ranked a tiny bit lower is despite the production on this album sounding beefier and having more punch to it, the drums on here just don't do it for me. They just sound a bit off. They sound like twigs snapping against a tree. I think that issue with the drums mostly comes down to the kick pedal, at least based on what I heard. With that said though, Ancient Sign of Coming Storm is a really, really good opening track. And the atmosphere on Where Death Seems to Dwell is so monstrous. It's really good. The title track sounds melodic and triumphant as well. Pursuit of Vikings, everyone sung the praises of that song, and I'll just have to agree with the masses on that one. It speaks for itself, that song. Valkyrie's Ride has a really cool groovy rhythm to it. Beheading of a King has really, really intricate, brilliant leads as well. And Once Sealed in Blood is a home run of a closing track for this album. But yeah, Fate of Norns, number 10, not terrible. It's actually pretty good. I think it is just the production that maybe lets this down a tiny bit for me. But if you like it, all power to you. Alright, at number 9 we have Jomsviking. When listening to all these albums back to back in lead up to this video, I did not expect that Jomsviking would rank this low. I used to really, really like this album, and I think I later realised it might have been recency bias that did that. I think my main criticism with this one is it's got a bit too much filler, maybe. I feel like this album didn't really need 11 tracks. First Kill, in my opinion, isn't too strong of an opening track in comparison to some of the other ones they've done. Wander is a tad forgettable as well, unfortunately. On a Sea of Blood, though, has a really epic crawling lead. That one gets stuck in my head all the time. One Against All is a really, really good track, and I personally would have felt that would have made a better opening track than First Kill. Raise Your Horns is a stomping anthem. The Way of Vikings should have been the closer, by the way. That song is a really epic piece. At Dawn's First Light is also a tiny bit forgettable, but In a Dream That Cannot Be, Doro's guest vocals on there contrast, I think, perfectly with Johann's. I think it's a great dichotomy for that song. But yeah, all in all, Jomsviking is a bit of a mixed bag going back to it nowadays. At least for me, like I say. This is all opinion based. Alright, next on the list is Versus the World. Alright, we're at the point in the list where there's very little for me to criticise on each of these albums. Death in Fire is iconic for a reason. For the Stab Wounds in Our Back has perfectly placed ferocious vocals, drums and riffs, in my opinion. Versus the World is a cool intro, has a creepy tone to it as well, which I really enjoy. Where Silent Gods Stand Guard and Across the Rainbow Bridge have brilliant lead work in those two songs. Down the Slopes of Death is my personal favourite on the album. 1,000 Years of Oppression and Bloodshed are both really epic songs as well, and they both serve the same purpose on the album thematically. I will say though, The World Will Cease to Be maybe isn't the closing track I was hoping for on this album. Just didn't really end off the album with a bang, for me personally. But the thing that really makes this album shine is all the fucking B-sides that for some reason they decided to cut from the album. Sorrow Throughout the Nine Worlds, Burning Creation, Mighty Doors of Spear God's Hall, Arrival of the Thimble Winter. There is just so much talent and excellence in this album. But yeah, Versus the World. Great album. Now we move on to the next spot, which is The Great Heathen Army. Yay, now I can talk about the latest album. Okay, when this one came out, I didn't know exactly how to feel. Like, there were some really good tracks on the album, but none of them jumped out of the track list at me. At least on the first few listens. Get in the Ring is a great first song back after Berserker. The bass in the title track is great, and the descending riff is amazing. Hedron has a good bouncy chorus to it. The double kick drum in Oden Owns You All adds this really good energy to it. Find a Way or Make One is catchy and heavy. The crawling lead in Saxon Vikings is awesome, but I do feel like Bifford's vocals don't really contrast Johann's as well as Doro's did in A Dream That Cannot Be. Skaggle Rides With Me is an earworm, but I do feel like Serpent's Trial doesn't really stick the landing for the album as the closer, in my opinion. A solid release though. I have definitely warmed up to it a lot since it came out. Alright, in the spot just above this one we have Berserker, widely regarded as the least popular Amon Amarth album out there. I've never understood why. I remember when this album first came out in 2019, so maybe there's a big part to play with nostalgia with this ranking. That is, potentially. But I do want to defend this album for a second. Well, for a few seconds. Fafnir's Gold is one of my favourite Amon Amarth songs. Crack the Sky is a really cool groovy riff. Shield Wall is a really cool descending lead. The piano ending in Valkyrie is really cool in my opinion. Raven's Flight speaks for itself. Skull and Hattie has a heavy bouncy rhythm. Wings of Eagles has just heart-thumping speed to it, and the chorus of it is great. Also, In the Dark has a really cool piano intro in my opinion. I like it when bands experiment with different instruments. But with Into the Dark, Amon Amarth's experimental tracks definitely usually hit or miss, but Into the Dark in my opinion is a big hit. The galloping rhythm in that song is just so infectious. I feel like the only serious criticism I can really give this album is the same one that I gave Jomsviking. There's a few too many filler tracks. Definitely could have trimmed the fat here and there on this album. Still solid though, I don't get the hate that this album gets. Alright, now we move on to Deceiver of the Gods, the number 5 spot. First of all, the title track. Mwah! Chef's Kiss. Father of the Wolf and Shapeshifter have really cool, catchy riffs. I Will Die on This Hill, Blood Eagle is one of the heaviest Amon Amarth songs you'll ever hear. Warriors of the North and Coming of the Tide are really fast and catchy as well. Warriors also serves as a really cool closing track on this album. Couple of criticisms though, As Loki Falls is a tiny bit forgettable, though it does still have that really cool galloping riff in there. And then my only other criticism is a couple of the songs feel a tiny bit formulaic, like We Shall Destroy or Hell. But it is a well-made album, another brilliant listen. Okay, that was number 5, now moving on to number 4. The Crusher. This is early Amon Amarth done perfectly. Bastards of a Lying Breed immediately followed by Masters of War. I could not imagine a better way to kick off an Amon Amarth album. Those two songs are so good. The Sound of Eight Hooves has a really cool galloping lead to it, which is thematically appropriate for the song. Risen from a Sea is really dynamic. It starts off with a really slow pace but then picks up for some like really fast shredding. As Long as the Raven Flies is slow and chuggy. Fury Divine's riff is really memorable. Releasing Surtur's Fire is also one of the best closing tracks on an Amon Amarth record. Also, going back to Amon Amarth's bonus tracks again, Eyes of Horror. It is criminal that song didn't make the cut on this album, by the way. But you can still listen to it as a B-side, and I highly recommend that you do just that. Anyway, that was number 4. Now moving on to my top 3. We have With Oden on Our Side. Oh my fucking god, this album just makes me smile just thinking about it. Valhalla Awaits Me is one of my favourite opening tracks on an Amon Amarth album. It's so energetic. The melody in Runes to My Memory is just beautiful. The ebbs and flows in that song is just... they were geniuses with songwriting on this album especially. Asator is just so fast and yet is also managing to be one of the most catchy Amon Amarth songs out there, and the breakdown in that song is just chaos in a bottle. Gods of War Arise and the title track are both earworms, by the way. And Cry the Blackbirds has really cool doomy elements in that song. And Under a Northern Star, I think, would have served better as the closing track. Only because Prediction of Warfare sounds like it would be better as an opening track. Still great songs though. Not a complaint. Across the board, great stuff. A star. Great album. Alright, my second favourite Amon Amarth album. It is Surtur Rising. Which obviously means my number 1 is Twilight of Thunder God, and we'll get to that album. But let's talk about Surtur Rising first. War of the Gods is just firing on all cylinders and is the perfect opening track for this album. Destroy the Universe is so bone-crushingly heavy, yet it also has an intensely catchy rhythm and riff. I love the downtrodden tone in Slaves of Fear. The galloping lead in Live Without Regret is also excellent. Last Stand of Frege has a really cool creepy tone to it. For Victory or Death is probably my favourite on the album, but it has some stiff competition. A Beastamized riff is perfectly heavy and addicting, and the harmonious calming section in the last minute of this song is so beautiful and leads perfectly into Doom Over Dead Men. Speaking of which, Doom Over Dead Men, a really cool experiment of a song. Also a very interesting choice for a closing track, and I don't hate it. I welcome it actually. But also when it comes to atmosphere, Wrath of the Norseman builds that intense moodiness brilliantly for this album. My only criticism kinda is their cover of Aerials. Huh? What were you doing there, huh? What was the plan? It's just a bit strange. I don't necessarily hate it, I just think it's an odd choice, especially for this album. And then if there was ever any doubt, my number 1, as I previously stated, is Twilight of Thunder God. This was telegraphed in stone. If you know anything about me, then this album is not just like my favourite Amon Amarth album, but is one of my favourite albums of all time. Top 5, maybe even higher than that. This album did a lot for me and my increasing love of extreme music when I was younger, so I owe a lot to this album. But it also helps that every single track on here is a banger. There's not a single skip song on this entire thing. The title track is catchy and deserves every ounce of praise that it's ever gotten. Free Will Sacrifice and Live for the Kill are both heavy, yet also have really cool groove-laden melodies to them. Guardians of Asgard is an anthem. Simple as that. Where Is Your God is by far and away their heaviest song they've ever done, and I will not hear any arguments against that, thank you very much. Tattered Banners and Bloody Flags is chuggy, and the drum work on this song is excellent. No Fear for the Setting Sun has some serious energy to it, and it just packs such a punch, that song. Hero has amazing atmosphere building on it, and Embrace the Endless Ocean manages to recapture that really dense atmosphere and stick it into a melodic, calm, creepy closer. Perfect end to the album. That last song, the fact that the tempo is so slow and soothing and yet also creepy is the perfect song to end on, because it just leaves you reflecting on what a great album you've listened to, which is why it's my favourite. And I love it. I love this album. And I love Amon Amarth. Go figure. I need to stop checking my phone one of these days, it will break. But anyway, that's my ranking. You know what? I will recap it. Alright, number 12, least favourite was Once Sent from the Golden Hall. Number 11, The Avenger. Number 10, Fate of Norns. Number 9, Jomsviking. Number 8, Versus the World. Number 7, Great Heathen Army. 6, Berserker. 5, Deceiver of the Gods. Number 4, The Crusher. Number 3, with Oden on our side. Number 2, Surtur Rising. And number 1, if there was ever any doubt, Twilight of the motherfucking Thunder God is my number 1 favourite. But yeah, that's it. That's my Amon Amarth ranking. If you disagree with it, shout at me in the comments. Let me know how wrong I am. But in all seriousness, if you enjoyed this video, let me know. If you have a different ranking, also put that in the comments. I'd love to compare. But yeah, that's it. I'm going to end it off here. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you guys in the next one. Goodbye.